My true talent is mailing labels. I feel that like that's my calling.
I always thought this about you. I'm glad that the
Yeah.
pandemic has helped you figure that out for yourself.
Yeah, no,
without any of us
has.
having to stage an intervention. So did you guys get, I don't really know what happens. Did you guys get Dash and Lily, the TV series in Romania?
Yes.
Okay.
And now we are live and we are welcoming all your fans on Facebook and YouTube. We are very happy to have tonight with us Rachel Cohn and David Levithan, the authors of Dash and Lily series. You know the book, you know the Netflix series. You also know the book Nick and Nora Infinite Playlist that we translated a few years ago. And it's a great honor to meet you tonight, Rachel and David. And also I'm very proud to introduce you to my teenager friends. They are very curious and they are great readers. So I will start with a few questions. Then I will let them to ask you what do they want to know. My first question, how do you meet and decide to write together? Rachel?
Rachel, why don't you start?
I'll start. We met many years ago through a mutual colleague, and David at the time still is an editor. So we were originally introduced as potentially I might work with him as an editor, but around the same time his first book came out, and we just started having a lot of lunches where it was more we were talking about author things. And I happened to have an idea for the book that became Nick and Nora, which would be a boy and a girl who are just running around New York in the middle of the night. And I happened to say to David, I think it needs a male writer. Would you like to do it? And he said yes. And that was very lucky for me. And that sort of took off from there.
Yeah, and it was lucky for me that Rachel didn't know any other male writers. So it was like I was her only shot. Like it was if I had said no, it would never have been written. And it was fun because I sat down to write the first chapter. All I knew was it was about two people named Nick and Nora, that they were in New York City and they lived in New Jersey, and it would all take place over one night. And so I was like, okay, what am I going to do with this? And I wrote the first chapter. And then instead of talking it over and saying, oh, let's plot this story out, I just emailed it to Rachel. And little did I know that I would be setting the pace and setting the basically the formula for us to write the rest of our books, that we never plot out things ahead of time. We just have a very, very shaky premise. And then we send chapters to each other back and forth. So neither of us knows where the story is going to go. But that's really what makes it so much fun to write, and hopefully makes it fun to read.
Yeah, that's wonderful. But I don't know, were any of you surprised or shocked by the chapter you received?
All the time.
All the time.
Yeah. I always say that the best part about writing with David is also the hardest part. And that is when I send a chapter off to him, I have no idea what he's going to do with it. And I have a lot of expectations of what I want him to do with it and little things that I set in motion that I hope he'll pick up on. And he usually never does. And there's always this initial disappointment, like, I gave you that, why didn't you go with it? And then it's because he went with something completely different that really sparked to him. So it's both enraging and wonderful.
Right.
And I'm lucky because, I mean, and this is a good proof that everybody's writing mind works a different way, that I usually don't think ahead. Even when I'm writing my solo books, I don't think ahead. So I'm like, all right, where's it gonna go? But I will say, I mean, from the very beginning, but certainly the more we've written together, we enjoy throwing curveballs at each other. It would be boring for us if we took a very, very straight and narrow path. So I think part of the fun is I genuinely don't know what Rachel is going to set me up for anytime I get a chapter from her. And I think vice versa. but that's part of the fun of it. Again, it can be very frustrating if you're like, I don't know what to do with this, but we always figure out a way to do it. So that makes it fun.
We have a question from Amalia. Amalia, would you open your mic?
Yes, hello.
Hello.
It's so nice to talk to you. I've been a fan for a long time, both of you. Both of yours. My question was, did you have a writing project together during quarantine or the pandemic? And if yes, how was the writing process different than from the other books?
Well, we wrote a third Dash and Lily book sort of that we finished just as the quarantine was starting. So I think that was a weird thing because there was a lot of question of, should we address it here? How long is this going to last? And we ended up not doing it. Other than that, for me, I mean, writing, I'm sometimes more productive because I have nowhere else to go. And sometimes not because I'm so distracted by the weight of all the things happening in the world. It's a lot emotionally to process. What about you, David?
Yeah, I mean, I think we did wrap up Mind the Gap, and then also we did have, strangely, the Netflix show came out over Christmas during the pandemic, and it was very strange for us because we had been there in New York while they were filming. The movie or the TV show is very much about like being in New York, and it's full of crowds and full of people. So it was very strange to sort of watch and have it seem like almost like not science fiction, but it felt like an alternate universe because it was the universe of 2019, not 2020. And in terms of writing, I've been writing very slowly. I did write one middle grade book, and I wrote it purely because it just brought me joy every time I sat down to write it. It was just pure fun. And there were other projects that I wanted to do, but they were more serious. And I basically decided in my mind, yeah, there was too much going on. There was too much going on in my day job. And I just thought I will only be able to write if it is something that is purely fun and sort of not very serious, which is what I ended up writing.
Thank you. Julia Galea?
Yes, I would like to say I'm also a very big fan, and I also really like David's book Every Day and saw the film adaptation of that, and also Dash and Lily. So this question is kind of for the both of you. How does the adaptation, how does the process for a film adaptation usually go, and how involved are you in this process?
It's different every time, but generally what happens is that there is somebody who is interested in the book, whether that's a producer or in the case of Dash and Lily, it was a writer that was interested in it. And so we talked with him and then paired with producers and they put it all together and sold it to Netflix. And in the case of that, we had a little bit of, we were there on set a lot. I wrote one of the episodes, but that was really the extent of my involvement. David was actually there a lot on set. Maybe you can tell them about that, David.
Yeah, no, it was fun. I mean, if we haven't already established, Rachel lives in LA, I live in New York. So I was lucky in that they did film it in New York, and I got to basically go and visit my characters and Rachel's characters and visit the places we had put in the book. And at sometimes, as we discussed, we were working on the third Dash and Lily book. So there were times where literally I'd be on my laptop working on my chapter for the third Dash and Lily book. And when I looked up, Dash and Lily were in the room with me acting out something from the first book, which is both really amazing and really surreal. So I did get the benefit of that. And then Rachel, again, got to write one of the episodes. So she actually got to translate Dash and Lily from our novel into the screen form, which is something that I would not be capable of doing, but Rachel did beautifully. So we got to have a lot of different access points to it. But ultimately it is somebody else's vision that is guiding it. And we luckily, with Nick and Nora, with Naomi and Eli, and with Dash and Lily, we've been lucky in that we've trusted the people who we've given it to. And that takes a huge, huge weight off to be just knowing that the people who are making the adaptation understand what your book is about. And for me, for every day, that was true too. I knew that the screenwriter and the director knew what the book was about, so I didn't really have to be that involved.
Great, thank you. Denis Korvalski.
Hi, how was it like to write a book in two? Was it difficult?
Do you mean like writing as a collaboration, or do you mean writing more than?
Writing as a collaboration.
Yeah, it's very fun. I often say that the hard part for me afterwards is that when I go to write my solo books, that feels more like work. When I write with David, that doesn't feel like work. That just feels like fun. And it feels like, you know, I have this great friend on the other side, and a lot of it is just me trying to make him laugh, you know, and eventually it becomes something more where we're trying to broaden it to many readers. But in the initial parts of it, it's just him and me, and just kind of riffing off of each other. And that's really fun.
Yeah, and I think especially with Dash and Lily, it's been really interesting because we've never let our characters get older before. I mean, so having 3 books and sort of revisiting our characters year by year, Christmas after Christmas, that's also been really fun for both of us, because it's made us have to sort of really think about what their lives would be like, what the lives of all the supporting characters would be like. And again, because Rachel and I at this point, we're family, we certainly know each other thoroughly, especially as writers. So it's really fun when we get together, not just with each other, but with the same characters over, and do new things with them. It's just completely fun. Again, we throw each other for curveballs all the time, but it is just, it's really, really fun. And it doesn't have the same weight as writing a book by yourself, because when you write a book by yourself, you're responsible for all of it. But when you write it with somebody else, you share that with somebody else, and it's much, much more fun to share than to do it alone.
Yeah, you're a wonderful team. Your books are amazing. Beatrice.
Hello, I am so happy to be here with you. I love all your books. And regarding this one, the Dash and Lily's book of theirs, I was wondering, who is your favorite, Dash or Lily?
That's a loaded question. We're never supposed to say who our favorites are. They say it's like choosing a favorite child, but I will tell you absolutely my favorite is Lily. Without question. She's just very lovable. And complex, and even though she has this really sunny disposition, she also has this element of darkness in her that she's kind of constantly grappling with, and so that's really fun to write, and it's really fun to see how she reacts to people and how they react to her, because she's also a little just weird in a very delightful way, I find.
Yeah, and the TV show certainly took that characteristic of her, and Dory played her, did it perfectly. Yeah, I mean, I will say I guess I've never written Lily, but I have more fun writing Dash. But if I had to spend the day with one of them, I would definitely spend the day with Lily over Dash, hands down. So with all due respect to my character, Lily is definitely the better person to be around.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Luana?
Hi, I'm so excited to be here and to be able to listen to you and to talk to you. I was wondering if you would have chosen any other actors to play Dash and Lily, or if Austin and Midori were the perfect choice for them, in your opinion.
I think they were the perfect choice. And, you know, the hard part always with casting anything like that, especially with younger people, younger characters, is that if you start out with an idea of who you want that person to be, in the time it takes to develop a movie or TV show, they'll usually age out of the role. So you get very used to not attaching your imagination to one certain actor. But that being said, I thought they were brilliant, and I couldn't imagine anyone else, you know, not having seen them.
Yeah, I think from the very beginning, when we just saw them at the start, we were like, okay, this is Dash and Lily. I mean, it was fun to see, and on the set they had that sort of relationship, which was great. They were very sweet with each other, which was really wonderful. Yeah, I can't imagine anybody else doing it at this point. But yeah, so at the beginning when they were like, who would you want to be Dash and Lily? We were like, we don't know any actors who are 15 or 16 anymore. So it was very cool when they cast them and we could see some of the stuff Austin had done. I had seen Midori in an off-Broadway play and had loved her in it. So that was really cool to be like, oh my goodness, that person that I saw, like perfect, absolutely perfect. And she brought so many amazing things to it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Georgia Mirica.
Thank you so much for being here. I just wanted to ask you a quick question. What advice would you give to young writers struggling to find their artistic voice? Because I know that a lot of us are trying to develop ourselves creatively and express ourselves in this way. And I think that we would have a lot to gain from hearing your perspective on this. Thank you.
I'll start because David will have a better answer because he's also an editor. Well, I just mean he has more perspective on it than I do. I will say from myself, and just remember being a young person who wanted to write, the single most thing that helped me the biggest was reading. And that was reading all the time, reading as much as I could, but also when you're reading, think about it. And if you have a favorite book or a favorite character, it was for me, it was going through all of those moments and really trying to think, why did the writer make that choice? Why did they use that word? Why did they put them in that situation? Why did I respond to it? And when I kind of was analyzing other writing about and trying to think about it in terms of my own writing and how I related to it and what I could learn from it, that for me was the biggest help. And the other piece of advice is really simple, and that's just write. Don't decide that you have to don't make huge goals that are unattainable. Make small goals. Make it a goal of, I just need to finish one page and then I just need to finish a chapter. Don't try to think of the big picture. Think of the small picture, and then all of those little accomplishments eventually add up and become a book.
Yeah, I mean, I will piggyback on that because again, I'm often asked this question and I have a number of answers, but the first one is yes, that know that the job of learning how to write is not learning how to write it perfectly the first time. It is the job of learning how to make it better after the first time. That nobody's first drafts are great. Nobody. I've worked with hundreds of authors at this point. I've never read a first draft that was perfect. They always need work. Even people who've been writing for 40 or 50 years still need work from their first draft. And so I think a lot of writers put the pressure on themselves to get it right the first time when that is truly impossible. The goal is to get something down, be relatively happy with it, maybe, and then to work on it, to get feedback from your friends, from other writers, and keep revising it and make it good rather than having it be good from the start. So that's definitely the first thing I would say. The second thing is that there is no right or wrong way to write. There's only a right or wrong way for you. And again, I just use Rachel and I are a good example of that our writing minds, some of the things we are perfectly in sync, and then other things we could not be more different. Rachel cannot listen to music while she's writing. I have to listen to music while I'm writing. Rachel can actually visualize what's going on in a scene as she's writing it. I can't see a single thing when I'm writing it. So you will find what your writing mind will allow you to do. And then the final thing I will say is, I mean, just the way that you phrased your question about finding your voice as a writer. And I think the thing to always remember is, as a writer, you are going to have many voices. That there is no such thing as one voice in writing. You are going to want to be able to do lots of different things and take on the voice of lots of different characters and try different things. So always just try on different voices for size. I mean, like, that's another one of the great things about Rachel and I working together is that usually we pick a character. I mean, Rachel and Lily being a great example of someone we wouldn't necessarily write a whole book about, but then we just sort of plunge into it, and then we're trying on a different voice with each other and seeing if it works. For me, Nick was like that with Nick and Nora. So try lots of voices, Don't put the pressure to get it right the first time. And as Rachel said, just keep writing and keep reading. And that should really help you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good luck with your writing.
Let's go back to Nick and Nora and Dash and Lily. New York, it's like a character in both books. Why did you choose New York, and what it means for you?
I'll start that one because in Nick and Nora, at least, the genesis for me started as an idea when I lived in Manhattan, and I used to go walking around in Central Park every morning. So the idea I remember very clearly walking around the reservoir and having that idea. So I mean, David has lived there his whole life. I've lived there much of my life. So, and certainly even when I don't live there, my identity is still as a New Yorker. I definitely identify as a New Yorker no matter where I live. And I think that will always be the case. So it's a great muse in that way. In particular with Nick and Nora, though, I first went to New York for college. So I very much it's very ingrained in my mind what it's like to be that age and wandering around New York City with this sense of wonder and awe and not knowing what's going to happen. So for me, at least, it definitely started from those memories of being in college and wandering around in the middle of the night, which, by the way, I'm very much of a morning person, and I'm not a night owl. So, that's probably the only time in my life that I actually did do that. Was those ages.
I can vouch for her being a morning person. Like, again, she's in LA, I'm in New York. There's a 3-hour time difference. And sometimes I'll get a text from her as I'm waking up. And I'm like, wait a second, if I'm waking up now, Rachel is up at 5 in the morning? Huh. No, I mean, the easy answer is, yeah, I live near New York. I work in New York. And so New York is a character, is the main character, or one of the main characters in my life. So it's very easy to put there. I will say one of the joys of writing about New York, and again, one of the joys of having Rachel and I share the books writing about New York, is that we will share our favorite places with each other. We will put all of these little idiosyncratic things that have happened to us or places we've gone in New York into the book. So it isn't like somebody who's never been to New York sort of looking on Google and coming up with the places in New York. It is a very, very personal city for both of us. And when we write about it, we are really drawing upon not the big popular places, but much more the deep personal places and putting them in. And it's funny because, of course, all these places imprint, and then it, of course, happens backwards too, where now when we walk around the city, there are all these places where like, oh yes, that was in the book, or oh yeah, that was in the movie. And certainly during the pandemic, I have been very protective of a lot of the places. Like there's one in the Nick and Nora movie, there is a deli where Caroline has some digestive problems, and like a lot of the stores around it have closed. And I've been like, no, the deli can't close. That's our deli. That's our deli. I'm happy to report it is still open. But again, it's personal to us now because of the books and the movies, which just makes it full circle.
Great. Also, music plays an important role in all your books. And it's important also for teenagers. What role does it play in your lives, in your personal lives, in your writing?
I mean, for me, music is everything. I have music on almost all the time. As Dave said, it's hard for me now I used to always have to write with music on, and now I can't. But I have it in a couple rooms away so that I can hear it in the background, but it's not directly in my ears. But for me, music is life. It was funny because I almost sent David a text yesterday, and it reminds me of why it's so important. I was on my hike and I was just listening to Pandora, which is they switch songs all the time. So it's not like my usual playlist where I know exactly what song's going to come up. And it was the song Everybody Knows by Leonard Cohen. And I had never really listened to the lyrics before. And the lyrics are so prescient to what's happening now. That I forgot to do it, but I looked up the lyrics and I was going to send him a screenshot of it and be like, this is amazing, just so we could have a text conversation about it. Now I'll just have it on Zoom in front of Romania. But you know, it's always affecting everything. I just feel like it influences everything I think about and everything I see and everything I do.
Yeah, amen. This is something that we have very much in common, and we are swapping songs all the time, or talking music all the time. For me, it is playing literally all the time. Like the fact that I'm not having this interview with my iTunes on is very mature of me. But again, it just infuses. I love life having a soundtrack, and again, sometimes, most of the time, we write about characters who like life having a soundtrack too. Some more than others, but again, that is an essential part. And again, I think the way that I treat sentences in my books, and Rachel the same way, like I think is as influenced by lyrics and music as it is by reading novels. Like I think it is a fun mix of both.
One thing I'll say about David too, I'm very jealous of this, is that he's really good at writing lyrics. Whenever you have to make up a song for something, I'm terrible at it. So whenever I do it under the guise of, well, here's a really bad song. So then I don't have to really explain it. But he's actually very, it's a skill he has not leaned in on enough.
Great, thank you. Luana has another question.
Hi again.
Hello again.
I was curious, how did you discover your passion for writing, and if you started writing while you were very young, like teenagers or something like that? Because I bet a lot of people here are writing themselves, and I was wondering how you started this journey.
For me, I'm like Dash in that I came from very bookish people. And so my father was a bookseller and my mother was an English literature professor. And so many in the family were either librarians or teachers of reading. So it was that was sort of natural, writing in that way. I loved books, I loved reading. And also I grew up as an only child and also a latchkey kid. I don't know if you know that term there, but it means someone who has usually a single parent or they're home alone a lot as a kid. And so for me, books were a gateway to, for companionship, but they were also this gateway to my imagination because I was alone so much and reading so much. And then I was always thinking about the characters when I wasn't reading it and what would I do with them and what could be happening. So that sort of springboarded it. And then, by the way, and I didn't study writing in school. For college, I did political science, but eventually writing just had to win out.
And strangely, I did political science too. So no, I mean, I'm the same. A bookish family, reading all the time. I loved writing. I do think that the thing that is surprising to me, even still, 20 plus books in, is that I loved writing stories for my friends. It was a leap I did not know that I was going to make, that I would be writing stories for strangers. And that still is a little crazy to me that we're talking to people, you guys are in Romania and you read these random things that we write on our laptops in our apartments. Like, that's amazing to me. That is completely mind-blowing to me. And if you had gone to teenage Rachel and teenage David and said, you know what, in the year 2021, you're going to be on this video call with readers in Romania talking about these books that you've written, I don't know that either of our teenage selves would have been able to handle it. And I don't think it's the video chat thing that would have thrown them the most.
Yes. The next question comes from Madalina Cristina.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to say I loved Dash and Lily, and I'm just so happy to be here. Ever since I heard about the Red Notebook concept, I always wonder what was the inspiration behind it, because now every time I'm in the library, I just check to see if there's anything there. And yeah.
David should answer that because, he started it, but also we should note that I do wonder if the Strand bookstore in New York now has an epidemic of red notebooks being left around.
I always check for them. Yeah. No, I mean, as with many things in writing, it's like, it's an intersection of many different things at once. It was my best friend Billy always carries a moleskin notebook and is always taking notes in a moleskin notebook, and oftentimes they are red. So when you're like, why not a green spiral notebook instead of a red moleskin? It is because my best friend always carried one around. The Strand is because it's the best bookstore in New York, perhaps the world, in terms of the scope of it. And so I wanted something to be set there. And then probably the most important thing is, as I said earlier, Rachel and I will usually start with a premise, a somewhat shaky premise, and maybe the names of the characters. And so for Dash and Lily, the premise was a cat and mouse chase between two characters named Dash and Lily through New York City. So two characters who would keep missing each other or chasing after each other. And so when I was writing the first chapter, I was like, well, how do I get them to make contact without actually face-to-face meeting each other? And so that's where the notebook came in. I was like, oh, instead of having to like have a meet cute where they bump into each other or they actually have an interaction and see what each other looks like and what they sound like, instead I can do it in a notebook. So that is where the notebook came from, and that's why it's a red moleskin notebook in the Strand.
And I'll add on to that and say one of my favorite books growing up was Harriet the Spy, and it gets referenced in Dash and Lily, I think in the first chapter, and that's because when I saw the red notebook, it was like, oh my God, it's just like Harriet the Spy. Like I could immediately go with that. It made me so excited, and immediately I could say, oh yes, I can do this for a whole book, a red notebook across the city, definitely, just like Harriet the Spy.
And one of the fun things, one of the many fun things about the Dash and Lily TV show was there was a box of 7 or 8 different red notebooks that they used for filming. And there was this amazing woman, Julia, whose job was to put all the handwriting in the notebooks and design all the notebooks. So we got to see the notebooks literally come to life, which again is not something we imagined when we were writing the book.
That's so cool, thank you.
Thanks.
Christina?
Hi, I'm so excited. I have 2 questions for you. The first is anything from Nick and Nora's story something that you have experienced?
For me, like I said, having gone to college in New York City and wandering around the city in the middle of the night, so that was definitely true, and that was something and just going to shows and going to hear music, and then all the weird things that would happen afterwards. Sometimes the more interesting part, very often, was what happened when you weren't at the show and just en route to the subway or stopping at a place like Veselka, like in the book and in the movie, which is a great Ukrainian restaurant. David?
I mean, the funny thing is that my first answer would be my senior year of high school. My car broke down so often. Like everything that could go wrong with my car pretty much went wrong with my car. Like the radio broke, and like literally they took it out. So there was this big gaping hole in the dashboard, and I had a boombox as my armrest to play music as I drove. And my 2 best friends loved to throw things into the gaping hole because it would freak me out. So certainly the difficulties they have with their car are something that I related to very much. And then, as Rachel said, a lot of the New York stuff, again, I did grow up in New Jersey. I would go into New York, but mostly during the day and mostly to go to museums and shows, not to stay up all night meeting strangers. But later in life, I'm in my 20s, I would stay up all night in New York, and I wanted to get the spirit of that. So I gave Nick a lot of my like 24-year-old self's evenings, but he was much younger.
And I'll add to that and say, I remember, I think we were on tour for Nick and Nora for the first time, and David was driving us to, and I think it was an event in New Jersey. So it was pretty local, but it was far enough that we had to drive there. And I think it was the first time I had been in one of his cars. And it was, I think, a car that passed down from his parents. It was a Ford Explorer that was a little bit old, not that old, but enough. But I remember that the service light was on. And I said, David, your service light is on. And I said that because I grew up in cars that were always breaking down. So it's one of those things that makes me very nervous. And he was like, it's nothing. And I think the whole drive there and back, I was like, so worried about it. It was fine.
Okay, I was to say, I'm like trying to remember. I was like, did the car break down on our tour? I don't remember that. So I'm glad that the answer is that no, it did not. But yeah.
Yeah, I just remember how casual you were about it. And it is something to be so casual. It's more a reflection of me and my anxieties.
Right.
Thank you. Denisa?
Hi, first, you two are amazing. And my question is, what's an important lesson you two learned as a teenager?
It's a good question.
I mean, I would say that ultimately your friends are the most important people, and that again, if you find the friends who let you be who you are, then you have the right friends, and you should use them to sort of reinforce that and help you become the person you're meant to be. Like if I look back on my high school years, like I am who I am because of my friends, like, which is not to diss my parents. My parents are awesome. But when I look at who formed me in my teenage years, it wasn't boyfriends. It wasn't like, I mean, teachers are great, but it was the close friends that I had and going through things together. So I always, a lot of the books that I write, like really have an emphasis on friendship. And I think that is ultimately the most important thing you can get out of your teen years.
My answer is much more practical, and it's much more related to having grown up in an era before cell phones and Uber drivers, but that's always have a spare amount of cash to put in your shoe or something like that it's just emergency money for when you get stranded somewhere because someone's car broke down or something like that, and you have a way to get home.
Thanks, Grandma.
Exactly. Those $20 bills that they would give you, right. Just keep it tucked away.
Keep it, in your sock. Keep it in your sock. You may need it, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Or just to buy everybody, dinner in the middle of the night or breakfast.
Great. Amalia Toma?
Yes, hello again. My question was, have you ever included like a small detail, the smallest of details in one of your books that you didn't expect readers to notice, and they did? And what was your reaction if that happened?
Well, I mean, mine is actually, I always put funny little things about family in there. And I can't tell you how many people from because it made it into the series, how many family members, it was the first thing they texted me about. And that is my mother, I have come from, on my mother's side, of a big Polish Catholic family, and a lot of singing at Christmas, and a lot of relatives, just like Lily. And my mom was known as Third Verse Betsy because she's the only person who ever knows the third verse of a song. So I gave that to Lily, and her family calls her Third Verse Lily. And like almost within hours of the show debuting on Netflix, I got so many texts from family like, Third Verse Lily.
And I will say, without giving it away, and this was not a deliberate thing on my part, but now it has become a deliberate thing on my part, is that there is a piece of furniture that shows up in pretty much every book that I've written. And I always have to remind myself to put it in, but, and some readers have picked up on the fact that this piece of furniture, which is based on a piece of furniture that my friend Jen once had, shows up in my book. So that is the cameo that appears in pretty much every book that I've written, is this one piece of furniture. So
and sometimes, by the way, I try to put that piece of furniture in, and then I feel wrong, like it's not my place to do it, but I'm like, it would be perfect right here.
I think you did once, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you, can you reveal us if we'll be enjoying the 12 Days of Dash and Lily on Netflix this Christmas?
Definitely not this Christmas. There's always the hope, but not anytime soon.
Yeah, unfortunately, they had been very much hoping to film here in New York this past February and like 2021. Obviously, with a pandemic going on, that was not something that they were capable of doing. It would have cost much more money. And of course, you can't put many more people at risk to do. So again, they really were planning to do it, but it was unable to happen. So we are hoping that someday the gang will get back together for another Christmas. We are very happy that they live on in the books, even if they can't live on in TV. But again, so many things happened this past year that, again, a lack of a second season is not that important. But unfortunately, it did get in the way, which is too bad.
Yeah, after Mind the Gap, Dash and Lily, there will be the fourth book in the series.
You never know.
You never know. Okay.
I mean, I think right now it's very interesting because I think Rachel alluded to this earlier. I think right now when we initially talked about it, like there would have been the question of like, so do we set it now? Like, is it Dash and Lily having a holiday during a pandemic? And I don't think that's a book that we wanted to write. I don't think it's a book that necessarily anybody wanted to read. So I think once we emerge from this, I think it might be easier for us to show Dash and Lily back in a normal kind of holiday.
Okay, and my last question, let's say you have dinner with Nick, Nora, Dash and Lily. Where would that dinner be and what music would there be playing?
I would definitely think they would go to Veselka. They're all New Yorkers, and obviously there's an attachment to that place. And even though it's Nick and Nora's place, it's Lily's neighborhood. So I feel strongly about that. That's what there would be. What do you think about from music, David?
I mean, well, it would be too meta for them to be listening to the Nick and Nora soundtrack, but I like the idea of them doing that. But what is music that they all could agree upon? That's interesting. I mean, I love Death Cab for Cutie. I'm gonna go like straight down the middle with Death Cab for Cutie. Like I feel that would be a good for all of them. But then like as the night wore on and they wanted to have more fun, like the Motown would totally kick in. Like I feel that they would start like indie and then they would slowly loosen up to Motown. That would be my wish for them.
And I feel like it would end up with everybody just listening to polka music and polkaing around wherever they are.
You see, I thought you were going to send them to Polly G's, and then the polka would have been right there.
Yeah, that would be perfect. Polly G's is a great pizza place in Greenpoint neighborhood of Brooklyn, which is a Polish neighborhood, or used to be.
So that can be their second dinner.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very nice. Thank you so much for being with us today. It was a great joy and also a great honor to have you with us. Maybe when this pandemic is over, you can come and meet your Romanian fans because there are many of them. Thank you, kids. You are great as usual. And
yes, thank you for the great questions. We really, really appreciate it. It's been so fun. Thank you for having us. Say hi to John for me. And like, again, yes, we hope to see you in person someday.
Yes, yes. And like David said, if you had told our teenage selves that we would one day be having a chat with readers in Romania, we never would have believed it. So what a joy and what a great thing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.